Tommy, thank you for sitting down with me. We are two guys with ankylosing spondylitis in different parts of the world. I'm in Kansas City and you're in London. I did not expect to be doing this when I had the diagnosis. I didn't expect it to be such a big part of my life. And I didn't expect kind of this now rewarding part, which is the healing journey and finding other people who are on a similar path as well, and being able to help each other. So you are the founder of Gut Heroes, and you are creating this resource for people with ankylosing spondylitis and other immune disorders, since there's so much overlay, to help on their healing path and do everything that they can to just kind of live a better life and get through some of the painful parts of being diagnosed with something like this. I will start with the first question, which is, how does it feel to be healthy again?
Oh, it feels amazing. And by the way, thank you so much for having me on. It's really great to meet you and great to connect and meet a like-minded person on this, really. But yeah, how does it feel to feel normal again? It's just unbelievable. I mean, I can't remember feeling like this for 20 years or more. So it took me 19 years to get a diagnosis, and I was just having this weird kind of mystery back pain, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and it just became more and more debilitating, and it kind of snowballed. And so to have something where I can feel like I can do anything, I can do sport if I want to, I can lift things up, I can tie my shoelaces, like really, they might seem like small things, but it feels like I've got my life back.
That's awesome, because you've been dealing with this for 19 years, and well, a little over, but it was 19 years before you got your diagnosis, if I got that right. And 2021 was when you kind of first started learning what you've been dealing with for so long.
Yes, yeah, exactly that. Yeah, I'd been to doctors previously, and I'd said, look, I've got this pain, here's where it is. It comes for 2 weeks and then it sort of magically vanishes, but it's really debilitating, what can I do, kind of thing. And they always just used to say, oh, go and see a physiotherapist or an osteo. And it was always really frustrating, because I knew something was wrong, but because back pain is so prevalent, everyone has a story about back pain. So you talk to people and they go, oh yeah, I've had back pain, and you start convincing yourself, maybe there's something wrong with me, maybe I'm just really overreacting to the pain. And then there's all the other symptoms which you don't piece together as being part of ankylosing spondylitis as well. Yeah, so it's just a really frustrating kind of journey trying to figure out what's wrong with you. And yeah, so 19 years with it has been a relief to finally find out what it's called, and to find out what I can do with it.
What was your first symptom?
That's a really interesting question, actually, because now on reflection, I know that AS can affect your skin and other things as well. And I think my first symptom was when I was actually sort of 7 or 8. I was getting eczema in my ear. That's actually been improved quite significantly since changing my diet and lifestyle. So I would say that's kind of interrelated. But my first kind of typical AS symptom would have been the sacroiliac joint pain. So that kind of, that stabbing pain that sort of feels like it's coming sort of almost just behind your bum, really, sort of just the bottom of your spine to one side. That kind of really piercing, jagged, almost muscle spasm type pain. It's kind of searing. So that would be the most typical symptom, I would say. That was the first time I thought, wow, something crazy is happening here.
But you were feeling stuff even when you're 8 years old. That's kind of looking. I've had a similar thing. My first symptom was not the back. I had eye issues, and it was just my right eye.
Really?
Yeah. That really turned my whole life around. I got hit in the eye with a basketball. I was in elementary school playing out, on the playground. Really, red inflamed eye, and it just wouldn't go away. Even, a week had passed, and then we were thinking, okay, there's something more going on. And so I kind of went the eye route. You always, at least here, I mean, for some more questions I have for you later is maybe the differences in medical systems,
Yeah.
but I was immediately just put on to specialists for the symptoms. So for years, I just had uveitis or, different types of eye diagnoses.
So it
But
was
then
uveitis, was it? You had. Sorry.
yeah, yeah, no, and then a few years later, I think I'm in middle school then, and then they started. That's when I got my first arthritis diagnosis, and so it was juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, and that's kind of
Okay.
it's grown all the way from there into ankylosing spondylitis, and then I can look back now, similar to you, and be like, oh, all of that was, could be in the
That's
same
really
category.
interesting, Nathan. Yeah. So you were hit by the eye thing first, and do you think that it was almost? I mean, obviously it was always underlying, but do you think that getting the ball in your eye kind of triggered an immune response right then, and that was the thing?
I do, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was it, and I think throughout my life too. I'm curious if you've experienced this. If I got injured or if something happened to a specific part, it almost felt like my body was using that as its next target. Like it could grow into something more. I had an ankle injury at baseball, years later, and then I had an ankle thing for 3 months. It's a strange thing. Did you experience similar stuff?
100%. Yeah. I mean, when you were saying the story about your eye, actually, I've had kind of like really dry eye. Where it's kind of you wake up and it's kind of little crunchy bits, for want of a better word. And I've always been rubbing my eyes for years, and again, that's improved with the diet. But I hadn't really had too many bouts of uveitis. I think I had maybe had some, but I hadn't really. They just passed really quickly, and I hadn't caused too much trouble. But a couple of years ago, this is a ridiculous story, but I was I was in the dark looking for something, and I kind of bent over to pick something up, and we had like a dried stick in a vase on the floor, and it went right into my left eye as I bent over, and it was like really painful. But it didn't, like, nothing, no damage to the eye. But ever since then, I've had problems with that eye. So I sometimes will wake up at 4 a.m. with this searing pain, as if someone's dropped bits of glass in my eye. And, I can't look out of that eye for at least an hour and a half. And I've had to go to opticians and get all this kind of, magical stuff to put in it to try and fix it. But yeah, that kind of to your point, it's really similar story, really. Something going in your eye, and then suddenly it feels like your body's massively overreacting, and now you have this weird echo that follows you throughout.
That's incredible. Yeah, that's very similar. It almost feels to me sometimes that like my immune system's on red alert, and it overreacts to anything, and it kind of remembers it. Like you talking about your eye thing, that's interesting that you kind of have reverberating effects from that after. It's not just an immediate thing. I get up in the morning and I'll rinse my face with water, and I'll notice my right eye gets a little bit red still to this day. And I haven't had eye stuff for years. I haven't gone to the eye doctor.
Really? Yeah.
And I feel like it's this subconscious fear of, okay, there's water in the eye, stuff's going on, could this, do I need to protect, my body's thinking, do I need to overprotect this eye again? And it's a strange
Definitely.
thing. It almost feels like it's just kind of on red alert all the time and a little bit too sensitive.
That's such a good analogy. I always think that it feels like there's a kind of military unit in these different regions, and they're sometimes like sort of firing just to make sure there's no enemy coming. It's like a really strange, it's a red alert, as you say.
An anxiety loop too, because then you're worried about you're worried about the overreaction, and then sometimes I can't tell if the reaction is just due to my worrying or if it's actually
100%. Yeah.
my body. I'd like to go more into your story. When you got diagnosed in 2021, I saw that you talked about the 3 rheumatologists you had. The first you were talking about the things you were finding yourself about diet, specifically like cutting out starch, and your interest in trying those things and getting their opinions on them. And your first rheumatologist said, it's probably not likely, but anything's possible. I love that. And then your second rheumatologist said, they actually read about it after you brought it up, is what I saw you say about that. And so that was nice. It blows my mind that they had not, it took you to turn them on to that kind of, information.
It's
And
mad,
your
isn't it?
third, yeah, it's crazy. Your third rheumatologist was kind of irritated by the diet question,
Yeah,
but then kind of let go and said, "Okay, if you want to cut sugar, I think that's okay."
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
That
it's
is a
kind of funny
wild.
actually because like the first rheumatologist you mentioned was I was kind of waiting quite a while to get that kind of first appointment. Once they over here, once you have to get that initial bout of tests, and then they refer you to a rheumatologist. But it was kind of in the midst of all the COVID stuff, so there was a bit of a backlog, and it was going to be a few months before that rheumatology appointment. So my work were really kind, and they were seeing me in quite a lot of pain, and they said, "Look, we're just going to pay for a one-off specialist appointment, just so you get a bit of a sense of, what could be going on and anything you can do." And they picked like one of the top guys in Harley Street, which is like our, the best possible rheumatologists, and that was the guy who was kind of like, "Well, no, probably not. It's not impossible." And I was sitting there thinking, "My goodness, I've been reading all these papers. Am I going mad? Is this stuff out there?" Or it just seemed astonishing that someone at the top of their game, absolute top of their game, hadn't even read about it, hadn't even, had no concept. So that was interesting. But it was nice to have the second guy, go away, do some homework, and come back again.
That's so funny. I had the same experience here, and that's why I thought it was so interesting. Because over here, as I've started to kind of consume more health related content, it's very easy to bash our medical system here in the U.S. And so I honestly don't even really want to like go into all that, but it's so curious to me to like. It was interesting to see that you had similar experiences. That it kind of seems like it's a global thing. That
Yeah.
this stuff is so new. I mean, it's and with the internet now, I mean, it almost is kind of up to the individual to go seek that out and then find the right, care provider who can help them, as opposed to how it's been, for decades, which was sit back and just go let the professional handle it for you. I don't think that's definitely not the fastest way to healing.
No, I agree, and I think you make a really good point about. I think it's funny what happened with my rheumatologist. It's not. I don't think any of them are doing anything wrong. I think it's important we don't bash what the doctors are doing and what the medical profession are doing, because they are doing the best they can possibly do, and they are time limited. They've got limited resources. We get the name of the thing that we have or that we think we have pre-diagnosis, and we've got all the time in the world. I was staying up till 3-4 in the morning just googling Google Scholar, checking out all the papers, and in medical school they do a huge amount of work, but they just don't have the time to go into every little niche thing and spend all that time. So as you say, I think it's really good if we can become more aware of the resources available and really dig into what we can do to help ourselves as well. Yeah.
It's definitely more inspiring. I agree with what you said too. I like the medical system. I'm appreciative. I'm appreciative of it. I got the biggest help. I took a is it JAK inhibitor? The injections. I took a medication called Imbrol,
Okay.
and started injecting myself with that immunosuppressant. And that actually, I think, gave me the space to dive in and learn. Because before, it was just such excruciating pain that it didn't even feel, it's strange, but it didn't even feel like I had the energy to take this on and to like find out, what could, help me to make those trips to the grocery store and completely change your diet. It's such an intense change to go
Sure.
through. You almost do need some sort of relief a little bit, and I think it's amazing they have that. And I think I see a future here where a lot of that health is done personally through finding resources like Gut Heroes and other things. And then if someone's in kind of an emergency situation and just needs even the space to be able to start, it's a great place to go to a rheumatologist and
Yeah,
use some
I
medication.
totally agree, and I think we're both. I think we both probably agree that for some people, going the medical route and taking the injections or whatever it is, if it's working for them and they've done their research and it's making them healthy and happy, then that's great. I think if you can get diet to work, that's amazing. But I think a lot of people have had great success on different medications, and that's not to be sort of sniffed at, I think.
So you were kind of forced to go this route just due to it being COVID, the health system's already maxed, and you kind of had to figure it out. You had to do something while you had the time in between appointments and all that. What was that process like the last 3 years?
Exactly. Yeah, I was told that they wanted to put me on, and I'm going to pronounce this wrong, but methotrexate, or so bad at pronouncing all the different drug
No,
names. But
that's it. I've taken that as well. Yeah, methotrexate.
so that's kind of, I think, from my understanding, that's the kind of frontline one they take. It's probably the most widely accessible. If they can get that to work, it's it's a win for them. But I was kind of in the midst. When I'd found out the name of the thing, I was going on Google Scholar, and that was my first initiation to different ways of. I was looking at biologics on there. I was looking at the mechanics of what it was and how it worked, and then I stumbled across these kind of smaller, lesser known studies by Alan Ebringer and his work, which revolves around diet. And so having that sort of glimmer of a diet hope, I thought, well, that's really interesting, because I'd been reading quite heavily about the microbiome just by pure chance a few years previous. I just found it fascinating. And there's all these different kind of ailments and conditions and autoimmune diseases that are affected by what we eat. And so it just felt lucky actually that there was that that I had that interest already. Then I was seeing this and I was thinking, I didn't think necessarily this was wacky or weird or strange. I thought there might be something in this. So that was quite a nice, initiation, being able to find out all that information, and then being able to Google it and find resources like KickAS, which is a wonderful forum, which I believe was set up by patients of Professor Ebringer some time ago. So there was a program running in London where they were treating people on the National Health Service using what you and I are doing. And I think it was some people from there who set up KickAS. And so that was a great place to go, where I'm sure you've seen this, but it had a kind of a spreadsheet type thing where you could see what types of food to eat and what to avoid. And there was like a forum with lots of people saying, oh, it's working for me. And that was my first spark of, wow, this really could work. So that was quite a thrilling moment when I found that. Did you have a kind of light bulb moment at all?
I just saw the KickAS from Gut Heroes the past few days as I've been looking at your site, and I thought, oh, that's awesome. My turnaround point was finding functional medicine.
Okay.
That was kind of a new thing to me. I hadn't even really heard of it, and then in that, seeing the diet stuff, and it did click for me, and I thought, okay, and another thing that really started my journey was I love YouTube videos and just watching people who are passionate about different things, and I started watching these videos about athletes, not professional athletes, but just people running ultra marathons, and they kind of have their whole thing, and seeing their diet prep and all that, I really had to ask myself the question of wow, if they're willing to do all this to run and just to do something that they're passionate about, even if they kind of started from a healthy point, they're not dealing with what I'm dealing with, I should probably at least be willing to do that level of intent and study and kind of effort into my diet and stuff to just get my body working like normal. I think I should at least try. So that was kind of my thing of turning it on myself and thinking, what can I do here? And there was a lot of stuff that I could do better in, especially at that time. I wasn't doing anything really with my diet. So I tried going vegetarian, and I did that for a little over a year.
Okay.
And
how did that go?
It didn't work like I thought it would. And now knowing what I know now, at least how it worked with my body, I mean, you can imagine there's a lot of starch in vegetarian diets. I was eating a lot of pasta, a lot of rice, and so that flipped for me. But it was a catalyst of I did feel a little different, and I don't know if it was a mental thing or placebo, but it felt good to put effort into it finally, and to be thoughtful and commit to something that was gonna move my health forward. So that was kind of my start of the journey. I had to find a functional medicine specialist here, and physically go in there and kind of do, it was pretty expensive at the time, but kind of a health reset program through them. That was about 10 months. And my life changed. It was very like paleo diet centric. There was kind of this detox period in between of like a month of very, very strict, you know, no sugar, no starch, all that stuff. And
Oh,
so
really?
it's very similar to what I'm finding with on your stuff, which I love. That's my favorite thing, is when I see things from different specialists. Maybe they're even different diets, but they have commonalities.
They have a nice crossover, yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Like
it's my
keto,
favorite thing.
paleo, yeah, definitely.
Yep. So, you know, when you started, how long did it take for you to start feeling a difference?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question, and it's kind of a slightly complicated answer because good things are happening and other things are happening at the same time. So, I would say definitely, even within a few days, I was noticing some difference. I was sleeping better, and that was such a big thing for me because I really wasn't sleeping at all. I was waking up sort of every 10 minutes, so nighttime was just like horrific. It had just got horrible, and I was feeling this kind of I only had this when the AS was at its absolute worst, but it felt like there was a kind of an alien swimming around at the base of my spine, and it was darting around, and kind of that was one of the points where I was like, this is not right. This is really odd. This is like, alongside the crippling pain, that was like a really strange symptom, and that kind of cleared up with you know, within, I'd say, 48 hours. And also I was sleeping for like an hour at a time instead of 10, 15 minutes. So that meant I was waking up with a bit more energy. So that was the first kind of big thing I noticed. And I thought, yeah, something definitely has happened here by changing these things. And that was exciting. So that was like a little mini win. And then I think I was in and out of flare for those first, I would say like 4 months is when I started noticing like some really decent symptom changes. But up until that time, I was having good periods and bad periods. And I think a lot of that was my body adjusting. I think a lot of that was making mistakes, as you do when you've got this really restrictive diet to begin with, because as I'm sure you found, it's quite hard to figure out what starch is in. It's in everything, it seems to be. It's, you know, if you look on the back of a packet, there's maltodextrin, there's all these kind of things that go by different names, and then they're starches. So you start out and you go, oh, it's just supposed to be low starch, I'll just have this and I'll cut back. And for me personally, that didn't work. I had to just cut it out 100%. And I'm hoping and expecting in the future I can bring back a bit of starch, but at that time and currently, I had to kind of eliminate all of it. So yeah, that was a kind of up and down bit for the first 4 months. Then a like massive improvement where I felt better than I had done taking NSAIDs, ibuprofen, that kind of thing. And then it was just building. Ever since then, it's just been building and building, and having longer and longer periods where I'm like almost completely pain-free. So I would say in the first year, the target was to get to kind of 90% pain-free most of the time. And I was getting that in the first year, and then it's just been building and building and building, and you kind of get almost greedy for it. You're like, this is incredible. I could feel 100% human, which would be great.
Wow. I love that. That's incredible. 95%, you know, pain-free. I mean, if they could have a pill that was like that, that'd be, you know, it'd be incredible. I think that's so cool that you found that. And I get what you're saying too about it's motivating. I feel the same way. Once you start feeling the benefits, you really want to you're willing to do anything to keep it going. And, because you're like the life, you know, your life changes. How did yours change over time as you started feeling better? Did you start doing different activities, and you know, did your mental health improve? There's a mental component kind of to this stuff too.
Yeah, I've always been really lucky that I've not struggled too much with mental health stuff. I've always been sort of fairly curious and excited to be alive kind of thing. But when it was really, really bad, it was a strange sensation. I kind of felt like, what's the point of being alive? Like, I'm in pain all of the time. So the slither of time when I wasn't in excruciating pain was, I don't know, hard to put a number on it, but 10 or 20% of the day, and it's just like, this isn't really living. So I didn't feel suicidal, but it just felt like, what's the point, kind of thing. And that, yeah, for sure, that's a kind of a really dark place to be in. So yeah, having something that worked, it was just a kind of, yeah, the sky's opening, and you're just like, wow, yeah, it just feels like you can do anything. You can kind of, which sounds like a strange thing to say, but just, if a friend says, oh, do you want to go and play a sport with me? You can say, yeah, I can go and do that. Whereas it just would have been a blanket, absolutely not, there's no way I can do that. I'll be in crippling pain for weeks. And, I'd always wanted to get into running, but I haven't started yet. But I now feel like that's something that I can do, which I just couldn't conceive of. I probably hadn't run for 10 or 15 years, just because that would definitely cause me either to flare or have some kind of nasty pain in that moment. So yeah, it just opens up a world of physical activities, and just being a bit more helpful around the house as well. I can lift things. My poor partner was having to do a lot of anything that involved moving stuff or picking up stuff. If it was heavy, she had to do it. She knew I'd be laid up and in trouble if I bent down to do an awkward light switch. That could cause me agony. So just being able to be a useful person is quite nice. Yeah. How about yourself? How does it affect you?
I felt the same way. I remember I do video production for work, and we had a shoot one time, and two guys that I was working with were like, hey, let's get up in the morning and do a workout before we have our day. And I thought, I was upset by the question, no, I can't, there was a weird mental thing where I think I was even like, you guys shouldn't, as if they had problems. It's hard to even understand what it would be like to be healthy, right? And I'm thinking, man, I need an hour just to get out of bed. I need an hour to kind of start with my shoulders, roll, mentally get through kind of the pain of waking up that way anyway, and thinking, okay, today's still, something good can happen. So that was a really tough thing for me, and it's kind of hard to even think back on that now, because I have the same experience with you now. I think that would be a fun thing. I love it. I feel kind of like almost like a little kid now, because I'm enjoying running around and being outside and feeling my body and stuff. So that's amazing that you have had the same experience.
It's a good. I feel the same when you said, I feel like a little kid a little bit. When the AS was really bad, and it was kind of a slow erosion over, in my case, a couple of decades of getting worse and worse and worse. I don't know if you had this, but I was looking around me at my friends and everyone else, and I thought I had this kind of, almost like I had this, I was aging faster than everyone else. Like, my aging clock was on hyperspeed, and I felt like I was like 80 or 90 in terms of my biology. I just couldn't fathom it. And then since doing the diet, it feels like a kind of Benjamin Button where I'm going backwards, and now I feel like I did when I was in my early 20s, and I'm in my early 40s now. So that's imagine being gifted that, someone going, right, I'm going to knock 20 years off, and it feels like that. I know it doesn't look like that facially, but physically I feel like I can do the things I was enjoying when I was much younger. Yeah, so it's been really good.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, the aging thing, that really struck me, because I felt that way too. And I had a funny experience where one of my best friends, his wife, her dad is into Eastern medicine. And I went over to their house, and she invited her dad to just talk through it. It was just a completely different view on health and wellness. And I've just, thankfully, you just get to a point where you're open to anything. And I've actually come to really appreciate that. Yeah. But I had hit that point where I was like, let's try it. Even though, as skeptical as I could be still about different things, I was like, let's just go for it. And he had me lay down on the floor, and he took this wooden spoon, and he started hitting my back in different parts of my arms and my shoulders. Wow. And it wasn't comfortable. It didn't hurt. It didn't really hurt, but I mean, he was hitting it. and
Yeah.
you could hear, like you hit a piece of wood, like you could hear that knock and that echo. And I tell you what, I still am not sure what I think about it, but he told me when it was knocking, it felt like, oh, this sounds like an old person's bones. And he
Yeah.
said that. He said, "Oh, I can hear it. Your body is so
Mm.
much older. It's not in good shape." And the fact that it was subconsciously popped in my mind, like these bones sound old, and then he said that, I was like, "Wow, there's something here."
Yeah.
So it was interesting to get his take on things, but it was it was another one of those eye-opening moments where, I kind of recognized that I, it was going to be a bad journey to keep going down if my bones were 60 and I'm 27 at the time, like, I didn't know what was going to happen. So, that was one of those funny experiences. That's what led me to try. I started seeing Wim Hof. Have you ever heard of
Oh
him?
yeah. Yeah. I'm
And
into Wim Hof. Yeah.
yes. So I really liked that, and I started doing the cold showers. And I wasn't doing the heat though. Now I'd like to do both, but I think my body responds to the heat really well. So anyway, I was doing all cold showers, and that's when his perspective was kind of the opposite. I think he's like, I think you should, warm your body up, and there was a spiritual component to that from his perspective. And so I got a gym membership and started doing the sauna more, and I found really amazing benefits. So I was going to ask you, what are kind of all the things you've tried? Some of it's very in vogue now. I see ads all the time for ice baths and all sorts of stuff. What were things that you started finding along your
Yeah.
path that you liked?
It's so true. It is. I can almost feel when I'm talking to friends and they're saying, "Oh, what are you doing to manage it?" I can almost feel their eyes rolling back into their head because it feels like we're doing some sort of trendy tour of all the sort of latest trends in health. But yeah, so I do, like you, I do sauna. I do that once a week, and I do it for an hour. Not 1 hour in the thing, but I do sort of roughly 10 to 12 minutes of heat, and then I jump into a not quite ice cold, but all close to that plunge pool for 2 minutes, and then I pause for 5 minutes, and then I go back into the sauna, and then do another 12 minutes back into the plunge pool, and so I do that over an hour, and I do that once a week. That's by far and away one of the best things I've come across and do. You feel amazing. It's just like this crazy inflammation buster. So if I come in there with feeling a bit kind of twingy, I will come out sort of bouncing and feeling flexible and like I could, skip home kind of thing. So that's brilliant. Yeah, I really recommend that to anyone who's thinking about it because it's super healthy for your heart as well. Great for cardiovascular. So yeah, just a general feel-good thing as well. Good for your mood too. And if you have a gym membership, a lot of the time it will come with that. What else do I do? I'm a big fan of walking and hiking and trekking. So I'll typically try and walk at least 2 hours a day, which I know is difficult for a lot of people. But I'm lucky that I can kind of fit it around my job. I sometimes work later in the evening. I'm better at working at night anyway. So I always try and get a really decent walk in, and that just feels like it's oiling the cogs a bit, and it just keeps me on top of things. And so that's a definite go-to. And the other two things, and one of them I haven't talked about on Gut Heroes yet, but the first one you might be familiar with yourself is sort of yoga. I do that. I try and do it once a day. I probably do it like 5 times a week, I would say. And I just do 20 minutes. And I just do like a stretching type of yoga. It's called Yin. And I find that absolutely incredible. That's just transformed things. Because I never in a million years thought I'd be doing yoga. I kind of, if I'm honest, I find it a bit boring and I get distracted. And I do find this a bit boring as well, but it's just 20 minutes. And once it's done, I can feel the benefit it's giving me. It's really super positive. So I'd recommend that to anyone as well. But the other thing I've been doing recently, and it sounds like medieval torture, is something called bed of nails. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I've heard of it. Tell me more. Yeah.
So it's the good thing is it's really inexpensive, right? You can go to pretty much any big online shop and buy versions of it. It's kind of like a foam mat type thing, and on top of it are these white plastic spikes. So it's literally like a mini bed of nails, but clean plastic ones. So you just put it on your floor and you literally lower yourself onto it, and maybe have some cushions behind your head, and maybe have your knees bent at first so you're not putting too much weight on the on your back, and then you just lie there for half an hour. And the way I do it is I just kind of gently ease my legs down so that I'm lying completely flat by the end of it, and it's incredible. It just feels like I'm having like a really deep tissue massage. And yeah, I didn't expect it to be something that had a massive impact, but it's really, really helped me personally with the AS. So yeah, it's another thing maybe for people to look at if they're interested. Yeah.
I'm going to try that. I've seen an ad for it. With the white spiky things. I was wondering if that's what you're talking about. Yep. I want to try that. Have you tried massage in general, or acupuncture or anything like that?
Yeah, so acupuncture I've had some real success with. I also had one where shortly afterwards I had the worst flare of my life. So I kind of have a slight, not PTSD, but sort of memory of that, where I'm like, oh God, I want to get back into doing it, but I think that session must have triggered or loosened up something. So it was probably good that it happened. But it was quite traumatic at the time, yeah. But I have, in general, found acupuncture to be absolutely brilliant, like really, really good. The right kind of massage, yes. I don't know the term for it, but some sort of deep tissue type thing, I would guess, where they really focus in the right area. I used to do that a lot more before I had the diet, and now I've not felt the need, if I'm honest. But yeah, how about yourself? Have you found that really helpful as well?
I have, yeah. It's the same exact thing. I kind of started with everything going full force, and I've noticed that, the diet's really the core thing to go off of, and all those are just really great tools to kind of just feel better generally, as opposed to using it to, heal a flare-up or anything. I haven't had anything like that necessarily, but I've enjoyed massage. I think there's a lot of stuff that I'm starting to learn about with fascia and just the biology of the body that I think has been really interesting. I kind of wonder, if we'll find more things with that. It's really interesting to hear you say that you felt that almost that one acupuncture session might have released something that triggered that flare, because I have actually kind of found that as well. And I almost take a spiritual approach to it sometimes, and it almost feels like it's my body not wanting to let go of the identity of being sick and having this stuff. I mean, it almost does feel like when you start, there are just some moments I've had, even with the diet, when I really started and I just completely changed my diet at the beginning, where I would have these feelings like, oh no, am I flaring up a bit, and is it because of this change? And there is a bit of faith, I think, you got to have to really give these things a try and not let your body trick you out of it. I kind of wonder sometimes if the body just gets scared and overreacts, like kind of what it does with everything. So that's been an interesting thing to me.
I think a really good, I completely agree with that. And I think a really good case in point, I don't know if you found this, but so when I am in flare, or, when I'm in a lot of pain with the sacroiliac joints, it's really hard to walk, isn't it? You're kind of like a zombie dragging one leg, because it's typically on one side. But conversely, I find that the only way to really properly relieve the pain is to walk for an extended period of time, in my case. So I had to you have to go over that mental leap of, this is extremely painful and I can't do it, to, I know I have to do this to get any kind of pain relief. And it might take 15-20 minutes of walking to notice any benefit. And you're kind of limping and you're dragging, and it's just exactly what you said. Yeah, it's like your body's screaming at you, I'm in pain, don't do this. But you have to kind of jump over that and let it release, I guess.
The exercise thing, oh man, I was so lucky because I was freelancing. I was in a creative career field, so I didn't have to, be in an office at 8 a.m. and sit through 5. Like I I had flexibility in my schedule even before COVID. And I was lucky because I got a gym membership, and that was my routine. I had about a 2-hour morning routine, and I felt guilty about it. Actually, I felt lazy. I felt like, wow, here I am waking up at 8, and I'm not ready to even approach the day until 10. I would go to the gym. I would walk for 20 minutes on the treadmill, kind of grind through it. Then I'm like, okay, and then I start feeling better. Okay, I'll jog a little bit, and then I'll stretch, and then I might just lift some weights. I didn't have any sort of program I was following, but it was just to move. And that clock, that thing felt like it had to reset every day. The mornings were really hard for me. What about you?
100%. That sounds like exactly like me, except I wasn't motivated enough to go to the gym. But in the morning I feel like I would wake up at this angle, like, so you kind of almost roll out of bed, but my body was like that. And it was like that, that kind of famous image of the evolution of man, where it's kind of like a crouching mammal and it's kind of going up and up and up. That felt like the beginning to every day. And I'd say it's about an hour and a half for me normally. And by the end of the hour and a half, I'd be this kind of very stiff, upright person, having been like a kind of 45-degree person.
I know exactly what you're talking about, and that's so crazy to hear you say that. It really does feel like your back is loosening enough to just stand straight after all that. Well, I like the nail bed thing, so that I'm going to try that, and I like those things too, because it is one of those things where changing the diet is probably the hardest, even though I think it's the most important. It is the hardest to start. I mean, there's so much diet, culturally, socially. It's blown my mind to see the pressures I feel, or maybe even invent in my own mind, to not adhere to the diet that even I know is gonna, really improve my life dramatically. Even, especially alcohol, and all that stuff. I don't respond well to alcohol. Have you noticed that alcohol might flare you, or what's your experience?
Yeah, so being from the UK and living in London, going to the pub is quite a big thing. It's what we do with our mates, and at the end of the week go for a few beers. It's kind of ingrained a bit in our culture, as I'm sure it is for you as well. And I found that quite hard, and I haven't eliminated alcohol completely. I've done the ridiculous thing of like working really hard to figure out which alcohol I'm less bad with. So I have a particular type of beer which I order, which is like gluten-free and has no nasties in it, and I seem to be okay on that. And then other than that, I'll just have like a neat spirit. I'm into whiskey, so I'll just stick with some single malt and a nice beer. But I should be cutting those out, and I would say to anyone who's starting the diet, if you can just cut all of that out, you'll get a massive head start. And because I think at the beginning of the diet, that was absolutely throwing things out of whack. Still having a beer at the end of the week.
I mean, it's one of the great points about sticking with the diet long enough and really being on pattern with it, because then you can afford to have that drink. Yeah. You can afford to I don't know, I hate to say cheat, but you could afford to have these things and not cause a massive flare-up like they might have in the past, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, I agree. It gives you more leeway, doesn't it? You feel a bit more secure, and a bit more like... I kind of don't worry so much about sauces in restaurants. So I don't know, like, if you've had where you eat out at the beginning of the diet, you're quite panicky. You're like, no, I just want it plain. I want nothing on it. And it's a bit of a thing, and everyone's looking at you, and you feel like a bit of a freak. And it's kind of nice to feel a bit more normal when you're eating out, and just go, I'll just take it as it comes, and I just kind of scrape it off. It's not a big deal if I get a bit of residue on there, or even if I have half a teaspoonful or whatever. That doesn't seem to affect me. So yeah, that's been quite nice.
Yeah, that's massive. Eating out, eating in general. That's what I'm trying to work on now. Even though I'm kind of 2 or 3 years into my journey now of like understanding the diet, really being committed to it.
So similar to me. It's almost exactly the same timescale.
Yeah. Yep. And I do have that. It was funny. I really had to commit. It seems like life will throw you tests when you're starting this thing, because when I went to the functional medicine doctor and I committed financially and my time and all that, which I felt helped me actually. There's a lot of stuff that I got even though I had to pay a lot of money for this program, a lot of that information is on Gut Heroes, and I think people should start there. What was interesting to me is it did make me commit, because I was like, hey, I paid, I have to do this. And it's funny, you would think that just wanting to live healthier should be all there is that you need, but sometimes the extra motivation, it's strange, even just belief that it can be done helps from having other people and committing to something. But when I started the diet change, the next day I was going on a trip with my friends to Arkansas in this little like lake town. And so I was so stressed about the food because there was nothing, you know what, there's things you could do at restaurants to help it, but there's no going to McDonald's and saying, hey, can you cut out, all this stuff. I mean, that is the product. They would just give me the empty box, and even that's probably not. So I went to the grocery store, and my girlfriend, now my fiance, she's been a massive part of my healing process, and she helped me. I had a lot of anxiety even just going grocery shopping. It's strange, but I got all the food I needed for that like long weekend trip, and I packed it in bags, and they all, we would go eat out, or they might cook their own things in the Airbnb, but I had my own little pack of like grass-fed meats and veggies and greens, and
that's great. You figured it out.
I just noticed, and it made me commit, because it's like if I'm not going to do it, and at the flip side, if I can do it on a friend trip like this, and I can still get through it, and really like this would be as difficult as it would probably get, then it would be possible to stick through it. So it's just funny. I feel like life's kind of tested me in that. Did you have anything similar pop up when you were kind of on your journey where you're going through this health thing, but then somebody has a birthday party and you're expected to eat a bunch of cake or have alcohol? What's been your process?
For sure. I think it's eating out with friends, isn't it? Someone invites you to a birthday or some kind of occasion, and I think the way I got around it was I would ask where we were going first, and then I would Google the menu, and I'd just try and figure out before I got there what I would eat and what I would ask the waiter to change. And then it wouldn't be that kind of panicky moment when we're all chatting and no one's really looking at the menu and they make a last minute decision. You can't really do that with AS. You kind of need to know what you can have and what you can't. So I would I'd look at the menu in advance, and I'd Google all the ingredients just to make sure, because you don't know what has starch in it to begin with, do you? There's all these like vegetables which are super starchy, which you would never imagine. I wish I'd had someone who just sat me down and said, if it grows above ground, it's probably okay, and if it's below ground, it's probably starchy, which I've kind of found out quite late. I was just kind of going the Google route, but I think it was eating out was the thing. But the great thing about getting a bit older is I just kind of stopped caring as much. Like, if people think it's funny or weird, okay, it's that's what it is, and it's okay, and I feel loads better for being on this diet. It's just working miracles, and I wouldn't exchange an ounce of the pain that you get from kind of not doing it.
How do you explain it to people if you're like out with friends and stuff, and they're like, "Oh, why'd you order that way, or why aren't you drinking?" How do you explain all that?
That's a really good question, and I think I explain it differently every time. I wish I had a really cool kind of concise answer to give people, but I think I normally just say, I've got this weird form of arthritis, and I've just found that cutting out certain foods just does wonders, and I don't have to take medication, and and it works for me. And so I might sometimes say it's kind of generally carbs or gluten type stuff, because people seem to be more aware of that. It's easier to explain. Like when you say starch, people are like, what? What's that? They know what it is roughly, but it's such a weird sounding thing. Whereas people understand lactose intolerance and gluten intolerance and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of try and use language which they might be familiar with is my normal approach. How about yourself?
That's a good one. I'm finally getting there. There were times when I would slip into my whole story, and then all of a sudden I'm explaining what ankylosing spondylitis is and all sorts of, it just like naturally goes in there, and I'm like, I got to stop this. This is the whole dinner then becomes about an autoimmune disease. So I like the way you do it. That's kind of where I'm at too. And it is interesting. There's so much, we talked about it a little bit with like the cold plunge and saunas and all that stuff being kind of, health is very mainstream now, and it's incredible. And it does make it easier to explain things, because there are things that I might do, or we might do specifically for an autoimmune disease or ankylosing spondylitis that somebody else is doing who's healthy and just still makes them feel better, and it's like trendy. And so I found that there's a lot more overlap now, and people are like, oh yeah, I'll talk about the cold plunge stuff or the sauna, and people will say, oh, have you seen this Wim Hof guy? And I'm thinking, wow, that's, I thought that was just in my algorithm of weird health stuff. So no, it's, everybody's kind of coming in tune. Do you know anybody else that has a similar diagnosis to you, an autoimmune issue or things like that?
So I know someone who's got Crohn's, which is sort of different manifestation, I think, but it's very autoimmune. I know some older folk who have rheumatoid arthritis, the one people are familiar with, and the knuckles and that kind of thing. I think it's the knuckles, but anyway, the smaller joints. And I know a celiac as well. I think that's autoimmune. So yeah, what's interesting, it's interesting you asked me that actually. I've really noticed that a lot of people, as they sort of hit that point between 30 and 45, I'm noticing a lot of friends are getting these seemingly weird random symptoms, and they're getting diagnosed with autoimmune disease. And I have this kind of theory in my head that maybe there's a certain amount of exposure to kind of ultra processed foods and things that we wouldn't necessarily have eaten as we evolved, and it's just kind of bashing away at the gut and the gut lining, and that's why we're seeing this kind of explosion of people getting these symptoms they can't explain and then getting diagnosed with something. And so I'm noticing more and more people in my life, yes, they're suffering with autoimmune diseases or autoimmune like symptoms, which is sad, but interesting.
I've had a similar experience, and I think back at my best friend has ankylosing spondylitis, and we both found out around the same time when we were younger too, or I think we were in high school when we both got our diagnosis.
That's mad.
I thought, wow, isn't that's just the strangest coincidence in the world? And now I think back, and there were two other guys in my high school that had forms of scoliosis and back problems, and I'm just thinking, wow, I think there's just, I think it's more than coincidence. I think a lot of people are having autoimmune issues, like you said. And the food, I've been really into, do you eat meat?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, I've been very into lately this grass-fed, grass-finished microbiome kind of soil health stuff. That's been a new thing for me to go down, because I really do believe that there's a connection of, it's all a chain, and if I'm eating an animal that's eating a bunch of grains and is confined and stressed, I think there's something genetically that happens to that meat if I were to then consume it. Biologically and maybe even a bit spiritually, I think there's just something there that's been my new. I'm always going down different routes. So I had kind of my Wim Hof phase and all that. I had the breathing. I've been taping my mouth shut when I go to bed. People think I'm a psycho.
Do you listen to Andrew Huberman?
Yes. Yep.
Yes.
I love him. Yeah.
I've got that because he talks about taping your mouth to breathe through your nose more, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So I bought the tape. I haven't yet done it because there's a kind of mental leap, isn't it? It's a bit sort of scary, the idea that you might wake up dead.
Oh, for sure. Give it a go. I've been doing it probably 8 months now. I absolutely
really?
love it.
Wow.
Yeah,
really?
Now I prefer it. If I don't have it with me, if I like travel and I'm out of one or I didn't bring one, I'm like, dang it, I would have gotten better sleep tonight if I.
That's amazing. So talk me through it. So bedtime, what do you do?
Yeah, bedtime, I'll bust it out. It feels more like a Band-Aid. It's pretty stretchy, and the adhesive's great. Like, it's not too strong, not too weak. And I'll just kind of, pucker up my lips a little bit, slap it on there, and then I'm just breathing through my nose. Those first few nights are weird. And I think it took me a few days before I really started waking up with it still on. I think subconsciously in the night, it'll take it off, and then it'll be on my neck or somewhere. But after a while, the first thing I recognized was I didn't have bad morning breath anymore. That was like a
Okay.
weird thing. Yeah, it's because I started, speaking of just being healthier, I started up CrossFit about a year and a half ago,
Great.
and I do
Yeah.
it in the mornings. And to me, it's like the craziest. I would have never thought I could do it, and I love it. I love
Impossible
it
a
so
few years
much.
ago. Yeah.
Yeah, I take it weirdly seriously as somebody who goes in the gym, and I'm far from the strongest guy, but I just really am. I'm into it, and I watch videos on it. I'm very into learning form and all. It's just because it's fun to me to be able to. But anyway, I started doing that early in the mornings. I'd get up at 5:30, and I would notice I'd always, do a mouthwash and all that stuff. And now I honestly feel like if I had to be in an emergency situation, run out the door and not brush my teeth or anything, I wouldn't kill anybody with my breath. And it's an interesting side effect of
That's
this.
amazing.
And then in my nose, I breathe better, and I
Yeah,
breathe better in my workouts in my
that's the
day.
thing.
That's the main part of it. And it took a little bit longer to notice that, but I don't know if you experience this, but
Well,
part of my morning stuff was my face would feel a little bit inflamed. My right side of my nose would be clogged up, or my ear would kind of
I was going
feel
to ask you that, Nathan.
stuffy.
Yeah, because my one of the reasons I'm sort of anxious about starting the mouth thing is that sometimes I wake up in the night and my nose is blocked. So I'm imagining in my head, oh, I've got my mouth closed, my nose is blocked, and then I'm just sort of quietly dying. But I'm assuming it doesn't work like that. Maybe by breathing through your nose, it's keeping those airways open so that that doesn't happen. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like it's a little bit like calling your body's bluff. I feel
Yeah.
like I got to the point where I've just gotten more comfortable with trying stuff out, or I'm like, I'm going
Yeah.
to test this thing out. I do not think that I think my body would wake me up and just have me take the tape off, which I I've had that happen one time where I woke up in the middle of the night, for whatever reason, my nose was clogged and I just ripped that tape out,
Yeah.
and, but I haven't had any emergency situations. I've noticed that I feel like mentally when I kept doing it, my body's like, oh, okay, he's committed to this. Like, open up.
Yeah.
If you want to breathe, open up your nose. And I feel like I needed to put my body in that position.
That's so cool. And are you finding you're more naturally breathing through your nose during the day as a result?
Yes. Yep. And I'm more conscious of it too. So I think there's a mix of the practice of it
Yeah.
and also it just being in my mind. I'm constantly, and now it's just more comfortable. And when I go for runs, that's been a big thing. I know you talked about starting running. I still struggle with my runs. I'm very slow. And it's a frustrating thing even in CrossFit sometimes where I'll see people where I think might be more physically capable and they're just torching me on a run. And the breathing has been a really nice way to start because another guy I really like watching is Mark Bell. He's a power lifter and then started getting into all sorts of other kind of ways of health because he had an incredible powerlifting career, was this massive strong guy, but didn't feel all that healthy. He couldn't run, he couldn't do
Yeah.
things. He had mobility issues. So I love listening to his podcast. And anyway, he was talking about starting running. And here's this big bodybuilder guy who could, slow start. He's running marathons now, and he was also very into the nose breathing. And his thing was keeping the heart rate down. And the thing I picked up from him was to do my runs just breathing through my nose. And if I couldn't keep up with my breathing through my nose and I wanted to breathe through my mouth, I had to slow it down. And if that meant just going to a really slow walk and then kind of picking up a little slight jog. If I kept it through my nose, it made running more fun because I think subconsciously I would just, I think I associated running with being out of breath. So I'd run until I, get out of
Hyperventilating
breath.
almost, aren't you? Yeah.
Yes. And there's been a lot of stuff, now I'm learning about, you can go down that rabbit hole and there's zone 2 running, which is running at that certain heart rate actually will help improve your speed and your distance. And, so there's just so many fun
That is
kind of
brilliant. I'm
rabbit
going
holes.
to try that right away, that nose mouth tape thing. Yeah. Because
Yeah.
I knew
Yeah.
it was the right thing to do, but it's great hearing that you've done it. You've got the same thing I've got and you've seen a real benefit. So that's brilliant. Yeah.
I like that. Well, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, going back to what you were saying about sort of the meat and the microbiome and that kind of thing. I really agree. I think there's a movement, I think it's in the US actually, is it called regenerative farming? And it's literally where it's looking at that. So, rather than us shipping in all this fertilizer and nitrogen and all this kind of stuff, it comes from the animal's poop, goes into the ground, and the rest of the ecosystem gets to thrive off that. And the whole thing is its own natural cycle, and we need some of those microbes. The animals need those microbes. Everything needs that, rather than this kind of chemical process where we're putting all this artificial stuff, or we're just putting high concentrations of one thing. Like, yeah, I totally agree. I think it's a really good area to pursue. Yeah.
Oh, and glyphosate and stuff. Have you kind of gone down some of those rabbit holes of Roundup and different fertilizers and stuff with soil?
It's like horrific, isn't it? Like really scary stuff. Yeah, yeah.
It makes sense to me, and I'm always careful when I approach it because it can get political very fast. But like it's very interesting to me, and it makes a lot of sense that we're talking about gut microbiomes and leaky gut. I don't know if that's a term you guys kind of use over there too. And here we have something that is technically an antibiotic that's now in the soil and in some of the stuff we're consuming, and the animals that consume that are then getting antibiotics, and depending on the farm, they might inject them with even more. And so we know how much antibiotics affect our gut health for good or bad. And unfortunately, antibiotics in general are just kind of killing all bacteria. There's no differentiating between the good ones and the bad ones when you're doing the antibiotic stuff. And I totally believe that would affect our gut microbiomes and cause leaky gut if you're constantly exposed to antibiotics in a way. It's just interesting.
I totally agree. And we've been exposed since we were children, I guess. And it's, as you say, it's going into farms, and I think it's, very prevalent in some countries. And the antibiotics actually make the animals larger. So they get, there's a kind of, you're not getting any animals getting sick, so there's no loss of animals, and they're bigger, so you get more money. And I can totally feel for the farmers. I can see why certain farmers are doing that. But as you say, it's kind of then going to the system, and then it's messing our microbiome as well. We're getting gut dysbiosis and all sorts of other things. All the populations are being unnecessarily kind of manipulated. So it's something to be aware of, isn't it?
And it all feels so complicated. Like I love diving into it now, but for anybody who's watching or might see a clip or come across Gut Hero, sometimes I get afraid of going too into it because it could just get so complex and overwhelming. But once you're like once you're on the path, I'm like, sign me up. I've taken a class on permaculture, which is very into the regenerative agriculture.
Oh, good for you.
Now I'm like, it would be fun to have a farm. It would be fun to like, even if I didn't do it personally, I'm interested now in this whole new space. And I recently have been buying grass-fed, grass-finished meat from regenerative farms. So there's no, Roundup or glyphosate on their soil. And it's fun. It's a journey because it's expensive, and I have to commit. I have to put my priorities in order and to make it happen. But I've also noticed a huge reduction in anxiety because it simplifies eating. And that was one other thing I wanted to chat with you about. I know you had mentioned intermittent fasting as kind of a part of things that you found helpful. I feel like society right now, eating is such a touchy subject, and there's also a marketing component, which is, hey, a lot of these companies that make food, regardless of if they're healthy or not, make more money the more people consume, and we're just in this ultra kind of consuming thing. It's going to be hard to relearn how we ever truly ate to begin with. And one of the funny things to me is I feel like such a reduction in anxiety buying from these farms because it's not going to the grocery store and having a million options and I got to figure it out. I go here, I know that everything's clean, and there's cuts that I'm getting back from the farm that I've never eaten before. But I got 30 things, and I'm gonna go through it. So it's nice to just, instead of a whole grocery store run and thinking of what to eat out of the millions of things I could, it's really nice to have a core component of, hey, here's a really healthy thing I'm gonna consume. I have it all lined up for the next month or two, and I'll, if I need to, I can learn how to prepare it. But there's also the component of, it's making me more intentional about when I eat and how much I eat. What are your thoughts on all that?
I'm totally with you on all of that. I actually love the lack of options, which might sound weird. I didn't love it at the beginning of the diet because pretty much all I ate was pasta and bread and, all those things. So there was that kind of discovery of what can I have. But I kind of treated it more like there's loads of exciting things I can discover that I wasn't eating before. And it sounds like you've had that a bit with, when you were saying about meat, you start finding out about different cuts, and maybe you're sort of respecting and using the whole animal rather than it just being a fillet or this, that and the other. I eat organ meat, which is incredibly good for you, and it's actually really inexpensive as well. I don't know if it's the same in the US, but it's much cheaper, and super nutritious. And so you're kind of discovering all these, you're taking away things, but you're also discovering new things, and that's quite nice. And I actually like the fact that when I go to a supermarket or a store or somewhere to eat, I can look at what's on the shelf and go, I'll have that. I can only have that. So that's easy. I'm in and out. I don't really like shopping, so it's quick and easy. And the same, if I was eating out, I look at the menu and go, that's the thing I can have, and I can spot it within about 3 seconds, and it's done. I can get on with chatting with friends and stuff. So it's weirdly liberating, isn't it? Having this sort of paralysis of choice where you're just, all this marketing is screaming at you. For us who are successfully managing our AS through diet, we know that pretty much anything that has a character on it or some sort of claim on it is going to cause us a world of pain. So we just condition to kind of ignore it now, which I think is really a really good thing. It's made us healthier. Yeah.
I love that. Liberating is a perfect word. I also love that saying, you could eat to live or live to eat. And I never really thought about that too much until recently. And man, I feel like before this, I was really living to eat. It'd be a constant stressor. What am I going to have today? I never, it's taken me a long time to get to a point where I'm even intentional and planning ahead of what I might eat a few days in advance, even if it's stuff I have in my own home. And it's so much easier now because I can't make a million things. There's not a million things I'm going to go buy. And then I can focus more on living. It sounds funny. And I also noticed too, I've enjoyed taking out a lot of the stimulus with food in terms of sugar, salt, all that stuff. I'm getting a lot more plain. And at first it was an adjustment, and now it almost feels like less stressful on my body to handle, all these flavorings of like every meal I was eating, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, had to just be an explosion of taste in my mouth. I got like accustomed to that. And I think there's some amount of stress, I think, to the body to digest all that and to handle all that. And it's been a lot more convenient to like eat a nicely prepared chicken breast with some broccoli and know, wow, immediately after this, I could go, play some sports or, go for a swim with my friends. And, when you're just eating everything,
you might feel tired or bloated. Yeah, and I completely agree about the taste buds thing. That is such a good point. I think it's really good for anyone who might be watching this and going, I'm starting the diet or thinking of starting the diet, and where are my flavors gone? This is scary. I don't know what to eat and all this kind of stuff. Your taste buds, as you say, absolutely adapt. I love the plain stuff because actually it's not plain. There's actually flavor in the actual ingredient. It's delicious, and you actually taste what the broccoli tastes like, or you taste what the chicken tastes like, or whatever it is. If it's good quality, you really appreciate it because your taste buds are suddenly heightened, and they can taste everything. And we've just had them eroded away by sort of growing and growing flavor explosions synthesized in our foods. So I think if anyone's nervous about that, that's absolutely comes back, and it's great, and you appreciate new things. And I accidentally had a really small cube of dairy milk chocolate because a friend had bought some. They thought it was dark chocolate, which I can kind of tolerate in small amounts, and they gave it to me, and the sensation was bizarre. It was like, my God, it's like someone's put 50,000 different chocolate milks and flavors into my mouth, and it felt really sickly and rich and not that nice, which is why I knew immediately it wasn't something that would probably be good for me. So it just shows how your taste buds do definitely change.
That's funny. I had a similar experience. I had a taste of soda. I haven't had soda in so long, and I took a sip,
Oh, yeah.
and I think it was Dr. Pepper, and oh my, I couldn't, I would not want to take another sip. It was too much, and I would have not expected that.
Yeah.
And when I was younger, I remember drinking like 3 or 4 Mountain Dews a day, which is probably one of the reasons I ended up with an autoimmune disease. But it was, it's fun now. I mean, it's you're not giving up anything. I think you're always gaining, even if you're taking
Yeah.
stuff away. If it feels like you're taking stuff away. My last question for you was, you've started Gut Heroes, you've documented your journey, and you have a lot of information for people to find and kind of learn alongside how you did and how you found health. And I'm curious, have you had any responses yet from that? I know it's relatively new, but have you, what's been fun with that journey of creating a resource for people?
It's been really nice. Yeah, there's been some really lovely people emailing, just saying some really nice ones saying I've been looking for something which just kind of lays it out a bit more, because I think the reason I set it up was we've got all these amazing forums online, and I use and try and contribute on them as much as I can, but it can be super overwhelming trying to find something that puts things in some sort of chronological order or makes sense of all the different elements. And so I guess I'm trying to do two things: have a resource where people can get to the bits quickly, and if they just want a quick summary of why the thing might work or what potentially they could eat that would be okay, that they can access it quite quickly without having to do a 1,000 searches on a forum or on the internet. So that's part one, and the second part is really I just want to be a human guinea pig for people, and just I think I'm similar to you in the sense that we're just game for trying anything that might give us that incremental improvement. And I really enjoy doing that, because obviously you feel great, but discovering all these new things that are really beneficial to us, I'm sort of keeping all these super detailed notes, and I keep this insane spreadsheet with 90 data points plus on it where I'm recording everything that happens. And I think if it's working for me, it might not work for other people, but let's just put it out there, and then I'll put all the data that I experienced, and then if someone else can get some benefit from that, then that would just be amazing. So yeah, that's the kind of general goal, and yeah, I hope that comes through.
Cool. And what are your plans for Gut Heroes as you continue to grow it? Anything? I know you're interested in adding some more content on some of the other stuff you're trying out, the nail bed and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What are your kind of visions for the future of Gut Heroes?
It goes back to what you were saying earlier, that there's a lot of autoimmune diseases it's on the increase, and lots of people we know have it. And as I was sort of starting on my journey, I was seeing other people who were really struggling down the sort of Western medicine route, where they're just constantly being given really long courses of antibiotics, sometimes 6 months at a time, or they're being given really strong painkillers, or this, that, and the other, and they're having absolutely, not in every case, but in a lot of cases, they're having no benefit from that, and they're feeling worse afterwards. And a lot of them seem to be having autoimmune issues and gut issues. And so what I would really love, and that's why I've named it Gut Heroes, is to be able to kind of widen it out a bit and go, look, we can narrowly label each of our conditions. That is helpful to an extent, but actually it's all about the gut here. Well, it's not just about the gut, but the gut is such an important part. 50% of the cells in our body are microbiota, and the vast majority of those live in our gut. And for decades we've been ignoring that. And I think the path to our health, you and I, has been understanding that and looking at what we put into our body, and experimenting. It might not be a really perfect identical journey for everyone. I'm sure there are some foods I react to that you don't, and vice versa. There's a bit of experimentation going on, but I hope that we can kind of look at it in a broader way and go, look, we need to change. We need to take a complete step back of how we do things currently. Look at food production. Look at what we put in our bodies, and maybe we can start tackling some of these issues that are really affecting people, making people really unhappy. And so that's the kind of long-term goal, to kind of widen it out.
I really see that. I see Gut Heroes being a resource for even a lot more people dealing with than just AS or or even autoimmune stuff. I honestly think even a healthy person could go to Gut Heroes, try some of this stuff out and feel better. I think that's very cool.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Well, thank you for chatting with me. I'll be in touch. I'm excited to see where Gut Heroes goes, and if there's anything I can do to help you on that, because I think that this is so special to provide this information to people that are going through it. It's something that I think is unfortunately picking up steam as more people run into autoimmune issues. But at the same time, what a time to be able to share information and be able to, talk to people in different countries and share what's working. I think we'll find a much more efficient path to health in these next few years.
Well, Nathan, it's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you for putting this together, and I look forward to talking to you soon. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.